We are live. Yeah. How you doing today?
Good.
How's the weekend for news for you?
Oh, not bad. Well, I mean, I took time away from news, obviously, seeing family in Baltimore. So,
Nice. Yeah. All right, we got people trickling in. Welcome everybody to another episode of Brain Milk. We got some good politics, like always, in the Trump era. I wanted to start off though. Was 2025 the dumbest year in U.S. politics? Can you think of a dumber year, like maybe like the lead up to the Great Depression or the Civil War or something?
what's a interesting, thought-provoking question? Because, like,
But those
from
eras at least had like,
2017 to
yeah,
2020, was that more dumb or like horrible? Or, you know,
right. Maybe
there was
less
like,
horrible, but dumber.
yeah, I think more of the corners of government had some like padding on them that Trump couldn't
Yeah.
walk into. Um, yeah, is it the dumbest? Certainly the people he's hired are dumber than they were the first term, because like it wasn't until 2020 where he got like some really questionable people in there his first term, but like he came swinging out of the gate this time
Yeah.
with RFK Jr.
Well, the first term he had like real Republican politicians that like kept the guardrails, and he had real lawyers that would be like, you can't do that. Constitutional. He had chiefs of staff that were pretty competent and like would have meetings with him and tell him to like fuck off with like some of his dumber ideas.
Yeah, Christopher
Um,
Wray, and like he started with James Comey obviously, but coming out with Kash Patel to lead FBI, that was pretty weird.
yeah. But not even just comparing it to Trump's first term, but I'm talking about like all of history, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Like there were worse periods with more drama and calamity and chaos, maybe. But like none of the chaos was so like unforced error, like self-imposed by Trump and his underlings that just don't care and like the people get upset.
Maybe 1860 when the guy before Lincoln just kind of let the South secede.
Buchanan,
Yeah,
yeah,
Buchanan didn't
just
do
kind of
anything about
watched.
it.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
fuck this job. Just 3 months until retirement or whatever it was. Yeah, but like we can talk about some of the unforced errors of Trump, like Liberation Day with the tariffs. That was like really batshit crazy, right?
Well, it's not even
Like
in the air because that's what they wanted to do. I mean, they probably would have done it worse if they could have. They could have, they probably would have tariffed more countries more if they didn't think they could get away with it as much, right? I mean,
what
there were
were they
still
worried
some
about not getting
people.
away with it? They like tariffed islands that had no people. They tariffed like coffee and bananas that we can't grow here in America.
Yeah, but like, left to their own devices, would they have put like, double the tariffs on it, triple the tariffs?
I don't know, maybe. So you're saying there was someone saying, being like, hey, we can do 25% willy nilly in all these countries, no matter the trade agreements we have or the,
Yeah, well, I mean,
export import divides?
at least they came up with some kind of like mathematical formula. Make it look a little less like whimsical, I guess, but
Whimsical. Is that how you describe the Trump administration? Whimsical,
well, I mean, I
kind of a
guess it's like
millennial sense of whimsy.
yeah, a poetic way of describing like people who just don't know the topics that they're kind of leading the government on, right? Like people who don't really understand tariffs saying it's going to do magically fix all our problems, right? Like we're going to cut the income tax, we're going to give $5,000 checks back to everybody, which I did the math would be like $1.7 trillion. So it's like, let me get this straight: we're making $30 billion a month in tariff revenue, but you're going to give every American, a total of 1.7, $1.8 trillion. So first off, that doesn't make any sense because like if you're going to give everyone money back, you can't replace the income tax. You can't
Yeah.
say, yeah. So yeah, I would say that is kind of whimsical, but maybe that's underselling it a little bit. Perhaps that's you know, I try to avoid just saying stupid.
Yeah.
So like to some degree, I mean, they're like ideological fancies, right? Like it's like everyone talks about the Laffer curve. Oh, if we cut taxes, it'll increase revenue and growth will rise. And it's like, well, what? Here's a simple question for you. What if you're on the other side of the Laffer curve than you think you are? It's like
Yeah.
whimsical. It's like, well, we're just going to assume that we're on the right side and we're just going to cut taxes and everything will be magically better. I don't know. How would you describe it?
I don't know. Maggie Birmingham says, what are they doing with the tariff money? Has anyone traced what's going on? I don't really know. Do you know what they're doing with the tariff money? Is it just going into like ICE and like maybe like he's like, siphoning it away for the bailout of Argentina that's worth like $40 billion or the 12 trillion, or not trillion, but billion bailout of the farmers?
That's a good question, and I have no idea. What I would suspect is that there are probably like specific pots of money within the federal government, and it's going in one of them. So then, when when you have like a pot of money that's like some form of taxation, like I'm assuming it goes to the general fund of the United States government somehow, but what the rules on that are, like I assume you can't just like take it from that account and just go here, Navy, build these battleships, right? Like it's
Invest it all
probably
in Trump coin
yeah.
for the
And that's
benefit
not
of
to say, yeah, that's not to say that the president couldn't just do that and be like, who's going to fucking stop me? And then you could
because
also
this
make an
Congress
argument like,
won't.
yeah, and it's like, who has standing to sue? Like, is
Yeah.
someone in the Department of Energy going to sue the Trump administration? But like, they're all like, working for the government. So that's not really something you think that like people could readily sue for. But
Yeah. Do you think Doge was the biggest failure of the Trump administration this year? It was largely defeated in courts across the judicial system. It subjected normie Americans who don't really pay attention to politics, but they had to start seeing this platoon of fascist twinks go around and like block government workers from their buildings and like break in and like risk all of our sensitive data. And then we had to deal with these. I like calling them twinks, Elon's twinks, and like called themselves things like big balls. Doge cost more money than it saved. The cuts were needlessly draconian and burned through a lot of Trump's political capital, like right off the bat in the first like couple months of his presidency. And
well, I got one for you.
needlessly, yeah, go ahead.
Here's a good one. So like not being like having the political science wherewithal to think about, what election comes right after the presidential election? Oh, the governor of Virginia. Why don't we purposely fuck
Yeah,
over the most amount of people live in Northern Virginia possible right
yeah.
before they vote?
That was pretty interesting. I was in DC when that was happening, and I remember like at the hotel I was at, I would hang out with some friends at the bar, and these like government workers were there, and they were all just like literally drinking, like a bunch of dudes in suits were just like, and just in like a random hotel. I don't even know why they necessarily chose that, but maybe just all the bars were filled up with like government workers, but they were just like drinking away their sorrows. And I talked to a few of them. They're just like, we have no idea what's going on. Everything you hear in the news, it's worse than that. Like just really chaotic. So definitely didn't help Republicans in that Virginia election, though.
Yeah.
Some other things, some other highlights of Doge is that it needlessly gutted popular programs like USAID that earned America extreme returns on soft power and, saved tens of thousands of lives that are now, those are people dying that aren't getting like the vaccines or the food or the aid that USAID was giving them for a pretty good cost. And then, I'd just like to say officially from Brain Milk and the Halfway Cafe, good job, Elon, you dumb bitch. So do you think Doge was like just the biggest, most vocal failure of the administration of this year,
But it has to be a vocal failure because they said they were going to like cut $2 trillion in budget.
and give all Americans
And
checks again, the
yeah, so
Doge
like
checks?
yeah, by their own, lofty goals they set for themselves to be. It's like funny because like people say in politics you should really like under promise and over deliver. Well, they kind of continually over promise and don't deliver anything.
Yeah, right. Elon Musk recently, admitted that it wasn't as successful as he was hoping. Like you
Yeah,
don't say. He kind of
no
got
shit.
fired unceremonially from the government, and then accused Trump of being in the Epstein files, which we're just kind of glossing over now as Trump continues to pretend he's innocent with these Epstein file drops. I thought of a second, like a close second on the biggest failure, and maybe that it's measles are coming back, like with RFK Jr. cutting the vaccine schedule and everything. So the measles was a vanquished disease in America. Now it's coming back. And
That's
I just
horrible.
I like how people point out a lot of like anti-vaxxers will be like, who do you see that's dying of measles? We don't need the measles vaccine, even though measles is like actively vaccinated against with with like everybody. And I like to point out that people don't read books because if you know anything about history or if you read books about, I don't know, like the founding fathers, like everybody until the 1940s had kids die of like diseases and things that now we vaccinate against. So I was like looking it up. Abraham Lincoln had 4 sons, 3 of them died young. Jefferson had 6 kids, only 2 of them lived to adulthood. None of Franklin Pierce's 3 kids lived to adulthood. John Adams lost 2 kids as infants. Grover Cleveland's 12-year-old daughter died of diphtheria. And that was just like, I was just really quickly going through this on like Google. So, a lot of people had kids die prior to all these vaccines. So big win there for America.
Well, it's like everything else, like with ideology, people go, we haven't had a bank crisis in a long time. Why the fuck are we regulating banks so hard?
Yeah,
It's like, no,
yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
yeah.
Uh, you had an interesting thesis recently that you wrote about. Is Trump transformational? Your answer was not quite. And then you kind of highlight, you frame Trump's administration against the examples of FDR and Reagan. And what do you think made FDR and Reagan such transformational presidents?
Well, in the article, I talked about how they're transformational because, like, the presidents that came after them, specifically the presidents of the alternative party, like the opposition party, were forced to basically not undo what they did because they couldn't, politically. So I think that's part of it. Whether they wanted to or not, I think in at least in Reagan's case, like a lot of Republicans hated the New Deal. They still complain about it. Like, someone born in the 90s, like the Republican Party has still been railing about Medicare, which to be fair was Great Society, not New Deal, but they've also been, complaining about Social Security and saying, oh, if smart people just like took the money and invested themselves, they'd make more money than Social Security would give them, which I guess like, possibly is true. That
For
depends
some
on a
of
lot
them,
of,
maybe.
yeah, that's kind of like dependent on a couple like factors, some of which are completely out of your control. But then also it's kind of like a fail safe. So like when you make mistakes trying to beat the market, you still have some money and you're not like basically out on the street as a 75-year-old
Yeah.
with a cane. And like that's another funny thing is like the extent to which like Social Security and Medicare have a great benefit in that they don't like I don't know, saddle everyone's children like adult children with children of their own
Yeah.
with taking care of old people who can't afford health care or medicine. So, yeah, so the transformational part is to what extent do the president and the opposite political party that comes after the revolution of sorts, they can't do anything about it. So, for with Reagan, obviously, believing that there are more market solutions to market failures and social failures was like a huge thing. Clinton talked about how the era of big government's over. A lot of him and
Yeah, and I'd like
his
to point out that he said that in his own second term, so kind of
yeah,
like
yeah,
limiting his own power,
absolutely.
which kind of makes you think about the effect Reagan had. That after, like following the Reagan administration, you just kind of can't argue that that's where the government's at.
Yeah. So yeah, and then another thing too is like even thinking of George W. Bush and Obama, like a lot of the things every time they tried to do something, it was still kind of in a Reagan-esque purview of basically thinking about market forces and not doing things if like I don't know, it just goes against like the big government thing, right? Like famously, like during the bailouts when Obama became president, they were so determined not to have any number with a T, like i.e. trillion or whatever. They didn't want to go too much. That like they did the bailouts just because like 10% of like American workers had some job that was at least distantly related to having a car or the car manufacturing or car parts or car dealerships, car auto mechanics and stuff, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean it's obviously a framework. Like I think we'll see if it's kind of breaking down now. I think the $5 trillion that Biden spent, like the Build Back Better, kind of went away from that. But Biden was a one-term president, and kind of sandwiched by Trump. So I don't think Biden's going to really have some kind of lasting, political revolution, so to speak. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So then anyway, it comes to Trump, and then like right off the face of it, like Trump is probably not going to be transformational, if only because Democrats around the country are winning elections in direct opposition to him and everything he stands for. So you can't be, by that premise, I guess, or you know, the uh, the argument I set up is, Trump can't be transformational because I don't even think a lot of Republicans will know how to be like him after he's gone. So what is
Well,
there to follow?
do you think he could maybe with like Project 2025 just go into overdrive and like especially with that Supreme Court decision that could like invalidate all these agency and department heads to do anything essentially without like straight presidential support? Like if Trump just cuts the EPA, like just pulls America out of NATO and out of the United Nations and stops spending money on all of those organizations, like really just withdrawals from geopolitics at large, but except for like some weird bro relationships he has with like Russia, Belarus,
Well, I mean,
Argentina.
he's certainly transformed the Republican Party for better or for worse, right? But like the fact of the matter is, I think any Democrat, like if hypothetically Trump were to leave NATO, I'm pretty sure that a Democratic president that came after him would in fact try to re-enter NATO or apologize,
Yeah,
in our foreign policy, and then try to find ways to probably formalize things that Trump arbitrarily cut us from. But yeah, do you
yeah.
agree with that premise? you know,
Yeah, I think so. You wrote, if Trump vanished tonight, would anyone else rehire the gargoyle Stephen Miller to
yeah.
architect the national immigration policy? That's a good point. Like, people like him have no career outside of a Trump administration. And you go on, how many Republicans, let alone Democrats, would continue publicly defending the family separations, mass detention centers, or deportations to CCOT and third world countries like South Sudan? Like, that's obvious. I don't think even J.D. Vance would maybe be going out of his way to deport people to Africa.
Well,
That's a
to be
little
fair,
weird.
like I was like doing some research and I was like, how many people actually went? I don't think that like many people actually got sent to South Sudan, but like the fact that some were, they wanted to do it. I think it's fair to say that if given the
Luckily,
power,
judges were like, "What the fuck is this?"
yeah, like had they been, if they had full power and carte blanche to do it, they would probably send people to like, I don't know, Angola, South Sudan, Libya, here's some people to Syria. Like, I mean, yeah, I think they would do way more if they could. And obviously the courts are kind of playing their role of saying, hey, well, actually, um, what I was going to say is like just the idea of sending people to a country, like, for example, there's a lot of countries that speak Spanish. And like, can't the State Department come up with a agreement with one of the Spanish speaking countries to take people who obviously fucking speak Spanish? Like, to me, I just thought, like, isn't it inherently cruel and unusual punishment to send someone to a country they don't speak the language? Like,
Yeah, that's
especially
probably
when,
a good point. Yeah,
yeah, and it can't possibly be cheaper to send someone to Africa or the Middle East, right, than somewhere in South America. So, yeah, I don't know. It's
yeah.
I
And
think
then you
that. Oh,
go
go
on.
ahead.
I was going to say, and then you go on, and Trump has not meaningfully targeted the industries or thousands of employers that use undocumented labor. So that right there, he's not really doing anything to solve the immigration issue in America, which really comes down to just so many people will hire them to do work that like white Americans don't want to do. So that's kind of maybe the systemic problem that needs to be addressed if Republicans really want to stop people from wanting to come here. And obviously, Trump is not going to stop a lot of people from wanting to become American. They might not want to come here now while Trump's in office, but as soon as he leaves and maybe a Democrat takes over and kind of softens the immigration policies, stops making tourists have to, I guess, give 5 years of their social media information and post history before coming here. And then you say, like both parties will continue agreeing that immigrants, especially high skilled workers, are economically beneficial. That one's kind of a weird one that even Trump has kind of softened on. Like he pissed off his own supporters by kind of reaffirming support for some of those what is it? I forget what they are.
H-1B.
H-1B visas, and then he was like insulting American workers. So there just aren't American workers to do these high tech jobs. And then the immigration debate will probably not be that much different going on after Trump's gone. Like I think a lot of people will still, as even Republicans, have some appreciation for bringing in refugees and certainly like victims of communism and like our ideological opponents around the world take in some of their dissidents. And at a certain point, isn't it good for our spies, our like intel around the world, and just our government and cultural and societal soft power just to have people in America that speak every language and come from all cultures and diffuse all of the best things from around the world? And like certainly just from a
Yeah.
military and like national security standpoint, like people have mentioned like like Uzbekistan does not have people in the government that just speak every language and were maybe even born in all these other countries to be able to have like a real real dynamic relationships all around the world. So I mean, you can't even put a price tag really on the benefit we get from our immigration in that regard.
Yeah, and our country's had problems with that before, like in the Vietnam War, because like in 1970, I think, was like one of the time periods in American history that had, because of the very racist exclusionary immigration policies from 1924, literally 50 years later, almost to a T, right? You're at a point in American history where it's one of the lowest points of the number of Americans born abroad. And it went down as low as like 4%. I think right now it's like something like 16, 17%, or somewhere around there in the teens. But in 1970, 1975, it went down to 4%. And that was a big thing. Like, the State Department had no one who understood Vietnam or Laos or Cambodia. They had no one who
Yeah.
spoke the language. No one joined the State Department with any of that knowledge. And then it didn't help that a lot of the people who were there in like the 40s and 50s, everyone in the State Department thought, they're fucking communists. So it's like,
Yeah.
really
Let's
fucked over
purge them.
America. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have helped too if we had like more people that understood Afghanistan and Iraq during those
Yeah.
kind of debacles. It might have helped to like not debath like the entire country of Iraq and really set them off for 2 decades of sectarian civil war.
Yeah.
because most people had no clue the difference between like Sunni and Shia and Kurdish branches of Islam.
Well, I think it's so dumb because like this country is really
Mhm.
good at assimilating people, which I think is more valuable of a thing than most people even appreciate. Like just the fact that like you know, I love this like the whole story of like and I wrote notes about this later we can talk about like but just like reading that book about like 1910s and 1920s America and like prohibition and stuff, and just the extent to which like millions and millions and millions of people who came from 1880 and immigrated between 1880 and 1912 or whatever, right before World War One. Like you know, by the 1920s and 30s, their children and grandchildren are like fully American, like completely you know have good jobs and stuff. They're you know living the American dream or whatever. They have their own kids who like you know they're starting to say like they're not even learning their native languages and stuff, but then
Yeah,
like you know a lot of them become very politically active, and that's like the group of Americans you know that help you know I don't know, they're part of the greatest generation and stuff. A lot of them fought in World War II and stuff. So just the idea that like America can't take immigrants is kind of ludicrous, and I think that's you know I think for European countries it's a little more challenging for them. But yeah.
and even today, the most patriotic Americans are almost all like the foreign-born ones, people who come here and choose to become American and take the
Yeah.
test and study. Like I imagine, if you go to like any citizenship ceremony around the country, like on any given day, you just see the happiest people in America.
Yeah. And I'm reading this book on like the history of Central America and the crisis here in America with all the people coming to the border, which we can talk about later. But there's a funny quote that I think is kind of true in that these people were talking about the Reagan administration and their challenges basically um, to use like the refugee laws that were put in place in Congress in the late 70s. And I think there was some law in 1980 that got passed by Congress. It was basically saying that like refugees have a right to come here to America. It was the first time that was like literally put in law or whatever. And, you know, they had a problem where like they had tons of people from South America coming up, and you know, they said, how do we like, how do like the State Department's trying to figure out how do we read this and like work with ICE basically and immigration, customs, border patrol, that stuff, so that we can actually do this law, what it says that refugees have a right to come here. And they said, well, the problem is like, you know, that most people around the world would be better off here in America than they are wherever they came from.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, if the criteria is like, well, do they have lives of hardship abroad? And it's like, yes, most of them do, especially compared to
Yeah.
anywhere here in
Yeah.
America. You know what I mean? So,
Some like 2 billion Chinese Indians. Like,
well,
yeah.
certainly in the 70s, yeah, in the heart,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, but,
I wanted to talk about some zeitgeist moments of the year and just get kind of like your off the cuff reactions. What did you think about the kind of surge in popularity of the trad lifestyle, like trad moms and all of the influencers that like live on a farm? And it's not just that like it's kind of like an anti feminism or kind of like a neo sexist like Christian approach to life, but it's that like you get some of those trad wife people that are literally like, I'm stupid and my husband like everything like he's just inherently smarter than me. You know, he's more capable and all decisions should be made by him. Like, what do you think about just the zeitgeist of the trad
I think it's
community and
funny. It's like comically
culture?
self-limiting. It's,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things I think is funny about like most social, cultural, like I don't know what the word for it, like I guess a zeitgeist is pretty good like word for it, but like what I find funny is just like the amount of people are like, here's how I live and I like it, and they don't like it should just stop there, but all of them go, and you need to live like that too, and
Yeah.
all of society should be like this,
Right.
and I don't know. I just find it kind of mildly annoying because like there's a lot. This is a pretty diverse country. We have, as we just mentioned, people with born abroad, people with parents, grandparents from every single country on earth, every religion, every culture, every ethnic group. And like, yeah, somehow we should all just magically live like how any one group of people think we should
Yeah.
all live. It's
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah, and the trad lifestyle is kind of interesting. The whole idea of like the woman or the wife or mother not working and just staying at home and like that's what we should do. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of people can have a trad lifestyle. It's very very easy, but you just have to like start living like it's the 1950s, right? Like one car, smaller house, less clothes, no TV. Like
Yeah.
you're not paying all these streaming companies monthly fees, way less like going out to eat, your wife going to the grocery store and like buying like a third of the items that you buy now. Like you can live that lifestyle, but the standard of living was just so much more limited back then when the trad life was just kind of like the cultural norm.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting to think about too, because like um I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but I read this like economist blog one time that was really interesting. They were basically trying to like determine what percent of like the breakaway from the 1950s where like both parents started working. And what their conclusion was that like having parents work multiple jobs or having both parents work, that kind of thing, having less kids and stuff, almost all of it and there's like a correlation. So it begs the question of what's causation, but there's like a direct correlation with like the rising house prices. So the idea that this economist was trying to say was that as houses started getting bigger and nicer, they obviously cost more. And then, people started getting McMansions and wanting more and more and bigger yards and stuff, which was not normally the case, especially in the 1940s and 50s and stuff. And so their claim was that like a lot of this like cultural thing that and pushback that people hate that like people have to have multiple jobs, both parents work, that kind of thing. It's like literally directly tied to just rising house prices. What do you
Yeah,
think
that's a
about
good
that?
point. Yeah. Considering that like a lot of people could like get the down payment on their house with like a kind of like the stereotypical
Yeah.
summer job in college, or like buy a car, or like pay for all of their college too. I mean, definitely the college expenses are just insane. The amount of money
Well,
that people take on debts for that to have the kind of career that would allow you to have a house and a family.
yeah, one of the things that was really interesting, they were using some math to try to figure and validate this like premise or what they were thinking was that they were doing like an average cost of like your house versus like everything else you own. And apparently, I'm just reading some guy's like blog here, but in the 1950s, they said the like average home price was about commensurate with like the price of all of your belongings, including like a car. And they're saying that like now it's like proof in the pudding is that like home prices have just exploded where like, your home price might be three, four times more than the cost of like all of your stuff, including having like two cars
Yeah.
instead of one, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think, like the about the solution? Because everyone's obviously saying we need more housing supply. The only thing that'll bring down prices is greater supply. But what I see a lot is you kind of see those like formulaic cookie cutter apartment buildings, and like so much of the housing that gets built is just kind of like very boringly designed, and every like they all look the same from city to city. Just these big blocks of apartments that are maybe 3 to 5 stories tall, and they don't really seem to be that interesting or aesthetically pleasing. However, I guess it will solve the issue of just having way more homes for people, and it's not necessarily like houses. So, but I guess just housing prices will plummet if just enough people live in these much smaller, cheaper apartments, and just the demand for housing goes way down or something.
Well, I don't think demand will ever go down, especially with the growing population. I think one of the problems is like just like the spatial limit of having a city, right? Like how far can you reasonably live in any one part of a city and still work in that city? So
Yeah,
like if you think of like the city center accumulating like industry, business, that kind of thing, like you can only live so far away. So that does put like an extreme pressure to basically maximize the amount of people per square mile, which is why you get like more like know what take a city like New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, like you physically can't put 1.5 million people in a city with a finite amount of space where everybody gets a house, where everybody gets a yard. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I think that that thing is kind of impossible. So in one way, I think like cities building anything is good because it means they're not like falling, to crap and they're not becoming more dilapidated. But having people come in, because I've seen that with Philadelphia and stuff. Like Philadelphia, they're building a lot of they're nice looking. I agree with you that a lot of them look kind of similar, but like those townhomes that are just like, 2, 3 stories, a lot of glass, like, but they all cost like $700,000, a lot of money. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think part of that's just an impossibility of city living in 2026, right? You can't have a city with 8 million people and everybody have a house, right? You're going to be attached units. You're going to have multi levels, right? And so as people build up, obviously that gets further away from having a house to say, or certainly a backyard. You can't be on the fourth floor of a building and have a backyard, some kind of shared communal space. I don't know if
Yeah,
that answers your question. I just think, I guess my answer to your question is I think it's an impossibility that like we're going to change anything. Like if you have 1 million people in a city, like there's building more housing is not going to help. You're going to be able to fit more people in, but that doesn't fix the
yeah.
problems you're
When I
talking
say
about.
housing, I don't think it's like most people don't probably mean literally houses with like the yard, like a kind of suburban setup, but just housing in general of places to live.
Hmm,
Um, we can move on to white Christian nationalism. What do you think about white
good
Christian
segue.
nationalism kind of having a big like upsurge in kind of the zeitgeist? Like JD Vance obviously going hard on that. You get a lot of Project 2025 stuff that's kind of limiting immigrants. You get JD Vance talking about like the right kinds of people that should move here. And he talks a lot about how like Western civilization is. This is, I guess, I want to maybe talk about more like, what do you make of the arguments that like because Germany lets in so many Turkish immigrants or Britain letting in like so many Albanians or, people from their ex colonies that it's like ruining Western civilization? Are you personally worried about the ruination of Western civilization? Because I kind of don't care. I feel like America is and has been for a long time, like culturally, and maybe you could even argue societally, like the greatest country because of our diversity. And no one has more diversity than us. And nobody, because of our diversity, nobody assimilates immigrants as well as us. And I personally, in a country very diverse and multicultural like America, I do not feel threatened. I don't think that this is destroying Western civilization. I don't understand why people get so worked up about it. And especially like white people who get so obsessed with like white identity as a race that just kind of boggles my mind. I never even think about like my race really at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't either. I mean, I guess it's easier for certain people, but you would like to think in America that like the race should be the front and center thing. Yeah, I don't
But
know.
what
I
do you
think
think? Like JD Vance, they keep pointing out like the Somali population in Minnesota. That's kind of like the big buzz one right now. And like JD Vance can't help himself but makes him dig about how Minnesota is now like all Muslim or something.
yeah, Sharia law or whatever. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's just ignorant and stupid. I don't know. Like, it'll be a lot of effort for a minority group to take over a whole state, right? Like, it's going to be a long time before. I don't know. I mean, that goes into what do you call it American? And it's like, if it's not like everybody who kind of agrees, it's like Theodore Roosevelt, right? Like, anyone who thinks American values is an American. So anything contrary to that is just
yeah.
racist bigotry. I think
And
at the
like
end of the,
everybody up to Reagan was kind of agreed that America is not really a heritage or an ethnicity or a blood and soil
yeah.
thing. It's always the idea of just wanting freedom and liberty.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like a kind of topic that like it begs the question of anything you bring up, it's like, what's your point? And more
Yeah.
importantly, it's like how are okay, like I get that you're saying this, but do you realize how racist and bigoted it sounds? Like the idea of like Western like society anyway or Western civilization is kind of stupid because like a lot of countries are Western. Japan is Western. They're not
Yeah.
white Christians, you know. Australia
South
is a really
Korea is a
diverse
Western
place.
country. Yeah. I was thinking about this because like a year ago, I went to a bunch of countries in Central Europe and several cities in Germany. And like everywhere you go in Germany, there's like a stand for the doner kebabs that you can get for like the equivalent of like $3 or so, like 3 or 4 euros or something like that. And like to me, that is like, how is Germany not winning when they have a great food everywhere? It's super cheap. It's done by immigrants who are like moving to Germany and left Germany, because they moved there and now they're making a career off of like a doner kebab stand. To me, that's just like everyone's winning, right? Like the Mexican food restaurants, like how often, like I noticed this when you go on a road trip through like Appalachia or something, like the only new buildings you see will be like a mosque or a Mexican restaurant that's ran by like an immigrant Mexican family that moved in. Those are the only new buildings, the only like economic vitality. Like the Mexican restaurant's a good example because it's like they're big family. They're going to have kids that are going to live there. They're going to work in the restaurant. Maybe do like a Mexican grocery store or something. And that's how these cities grow. Like you get all of these cities that are just dying because some coal mine went out of business like decades ago or a factory moved out decades ago. And like the only economic vitality in a lot of places in America is thanks to immigrants moving there, starting lives there, and then kind of picking the entire community up by the bootstraps with their innovation. And like when you look at like the birth rate, things like that so many like some of these blood and soil conservatives are so obsessed with. It's like the reason America is not kind of like on a terminal decline right now is because of our immigrants having more kids and babies than native born Americans, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
I don't
I
know.
think
I guess it's like when I see multiculturalism and diversity, I just think that's like literally everybody winning and America being richer and more successful and growing and having vitality.
yeah, I mean, people tend to hate change, obviously. One of the things that I think is important is like I don't think it would be weird if you started to question why these people, like, even if they didn't spoke English or for some reason refused to, like, their kids are still going to go to public school. They're going to learn English, right? Like,
Yeah.
no, none of these municipalities have like all dominant, like, I don't think there's a city in America that's like straight up Sharia law right now. So it's like, and they may be Muslim, but their kids are
I don't
still
know.
going to go
You
to
know, but
school.
even that, it's like there's like Christian Sharia law. There's a lot of cities that want to have like the Ten Commandments everywhere on public buildings and public schools, right? Like they want to,
But is that
they
just
think
Southern culture? I mean, to some
I don't know.
extent, that's kind of
I
like,
guess, but like you get people that want like women to stay at home and not show themselves. Like, how is that different than like you see Muslims doing that, and their like wives are wearing a veil and have to stay at home or something. You're like, that's Sharia law. Muslims are terrible. And then you get the trad wife thing where it's like essentially like glorifying the same exact sentiment about women like they like having a lower role in society. I don't know. Like, how's that different than Sharia law? Really?
yeah,
It's
I
just
mean,
which book you're using to dictate
yeah,
the stringent rules.
it's like the only rule is like, is it weird to you or not? I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what it is. So like, oh, these other people are doing it this way. It's weird. I don't like it, even though they're kind of doing similar things. And it would be perceived the same way in another country, obviously.
Yeah. um, what do you make of the vibe shift among even Democrats that kind of like DEI, woke, critical race theory? A lot of those sentiments maybe arguably went too far. Slash, you get like the Mark Maron quote that like liberals annoyed people into fascism. Like annoyed normal people into voting for Trump and ushering in a kind of like fascist movement. What do you think about that? Do you think that it marginally, like obviously woke is like marginally in the right direction, and maybe there's some examples that go too far and are maybe a little too Puritan or something, but like obviously we are making good strides because of woke and critical race theory and like all the discussions we've had in the workplace, that like there is less sexism and just blatant sexual harassment and assaults and things like that, and like less racism. Like I would say society is a little more, there's like people don't make the same dumb jokes and stereotypes anymore because there's now a greater cultural awareness of telling people to like shut the fuck up. It's 2025. You can't make that joke anymore or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, on the one hand, like to some extent, DEI, whether it went too far, like I don't think anyone can deny it doesn't have some value and benefit, right? Like there
Yeah.
are marginalized groups of people. Like I think it is absurd to say that there aren't groups of Americans that don't have it slightly harder than other people. Like most people have women in their lives. I feel like some things in life are still marginally more difficult for women, especially depending on the age cohort of the people you work with.
Yeah.
If it trends higher, like you're probably having more challenges with stuff. I don't know. This goes into the article that you shared with me, that thing about how white men of a certain age demographic between like 24 and 30 for like a couple of years had it more like challenging during the DEI time. And like I don't know,
Because they weren't
if you
getting like hired and promoted and
yeah,
like
because like
artistically,
more.
and wanted to hear what they had to say, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's like, we talked about this a little bit. I don't know if any of your thinking has like evolved since that, or you have any further thoughts on it, but it's just kind of like, in every group, in every era of society, there's like people who are struggling more than others. And like, I think it's probably a good thing if society goes out of its way to try to help them, whatever that group is, right? And, in some countries, there's like, problems with like race or religion or sexism that like when you're trying to help one group, people intrinsically think that it's at your expense even though they're just trying to help other people. So it's like kind of an incredibly selfish way of looking at like the government trying to solving problems in a way that the government's never going to perfectly solve every problem. So like the idea
And
that
often it's not even the government, it's just private companies on their own volition saying, hey, we don't have any black people in the boardroom or like any of our middle managers, and we don't have any women. So maybe we should hire up women and black people for a while and make that a little more equitable. Even if technically, yeah, there might be like a white millennial that maybe on merit has some value to be hired or promoted or whatever. However, like goals at universities and like workplaces, certainly diversity is a big aspect to both the culture and just in general, like their human resources rules and policies and like wishes for growth, right?
Well, yeah, and I think part of it is just like, are you trying to take a problem, like a known problem that most like people of good faith would agree is a problem? And like, imagine you're a company and you're like, DEI, and you look around, and you're like, oh shit, we are all a bunch of middle-aged white men. Like that is not good. And it's like, think of like
Hmm.
publicly traded companies have a obligation to some extent. Like if you're a company that has 30,000 employees, there's going to be a level of diversity there you would expect that is probably much higher than probably some of these people boardrooms were, or their investors
Yeah.
and stuff. So like, that gets into even like the military, right? Like the military is often one of the most progressive institutions in American life and has been since the founding of this country. And just like you look around and you're like, wow, there's no one who's black of above a certain rank. Maybe we should do something about that. And it's like, well, the problem with that is that's like a 20-year thing, right? You're going to start, whatever the rate of people who stay in the military after like a 4 or 5 year, enlistment commitment or whatever, like to get the number of people to have the diversity you want, you kind of have to like supercharge it at the beginning. And I'm sure a ton of
Yeah, from
companies
the
felt that way
grassroots
too.
up.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you have no middle level managers who are like women or like, minority or whatever, you have to start hiring more people at the beginning because some of those people are going to quit because they have kids. Some people will quit for a different job. People will quit to start a new career. People will quit to go back to school or take care of parents or whatever. So there's like a million reasons. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's like everything in life. Once you start helping one group of people who've been like marginalized for whatever reason, most other people think it's unfair to them personally, which in a way kind of like bespokes the whole point of the DEI and why it's needed to begin with, right? And like look at this country. Think of how much like consternation and anger people had just acknowledging that cops treated black people on average worse than white people. Like, and then you're like,
Yeah.
well, I don't see the problem here. And it's just like that's all you have to say about that. It's like
Yeah.
here's a group of people telling you we collectively have a shitty experience that most of you don't share. Can we do something about it? And it's like, fuck you. It's like, why is that your response? It's a horrible response.
Yeah. All lives matter. That's so
Yeah.
dumb. Yeah. This is something I thought about that every once in a while, like, I feel like because Republicans are so good at just really like soiling and like destroying the like connotations of a lot of words and phrases. But like, I have this idea that, like woke and critical race theory and DEI, like Republicans shit on that. They shit on like things like socialism, communism. They just, it's like bad faith arguments from conservatives about all kinds of things. So I like to think that, okay, if DEI and woke is going to be such an annoying buzzword that makes people roll their eyes, why not just rename it something else and just start calling it that? And I feel like sometimes I get negative feedback about that because it's like, oh, you're just letting Republicans win and smear all these things with their bad faith attacks. But like, isn't that the point of politics of just like branding? And isn't politics just the act of constantly branding new ideas and taking ideas that are maybe not demographically, or sorry, small d democratically successful, maybe morph them, evolve them, and shift them? And so if like woke is going to be this buzzword that Republicans just use to criticize all kinds of things with like lazy bad faith attacks, just every 6 months come up with a new word. Start doing that, right? Like Republicans will never stop demonizing all these words. But when you get to the point where they're so successful that like normie, independent, apolitical, apathetic people get really annoyed, like the Mark Maron quote of like annoying people into fascism, right? Like I feel like Democrats should just be constantly rebranding everything, and just, like Republicans kind of throw spaghetti at the wall. Definitely like Trump does this of like flooding the zone with shit and just saying a million things and seeing what sticks and then going like that's how he built his whole campaign in 2016 with like build the wall, drain the swamp.
Yeah.
He was just like throwing shit out at rallies to like morons that would just cheer at like the more racist terms and ideas that he had, and that's what he went with. But like, why can't Democrats do a little bit more of that?
I mean, yeah, I think it would confuse some people, but it's not a bad idea. I think the problem though is there's a it's just bad faith arguing, right? Like if you think of any policy that gets demonized by the other side, like if your side doesn't want to do it, why wouldn't you demonize it, right? It goes back to like the death panel thing, which was obviously a misleading thing about what was actually going on, and it sounded good, and it's just a way to like lampoon the other side, but. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people do it in much more complicated ways than just like woke too. Like, for example, people code entire policies and public policies a certain way that's like unfair. It's like food stamps, right? Like people say, oh, food stamps, we should cut it. It's bad. And it's like, I don't know, if you think about how people talk about it, I don't know. In public policy, it's like, what did I write about that? It's it's like the way people respond to things is like asymmetric to what it's trying to do. Like, for example, if you have a policy trying to help people and like you're not really arguing that like, oh, I don't agree with the way this is being implemented right now. And like, I think we could tweak it a couple positive ways this way or that way. It ends up just being this is bad and it gets codified. This is evil. Oh, food stamps just allows people to like basically get paid to not work. And so I don't know. if you take a word like woke, like I don't know how changing the word every 6 months would help with that, other than
Well,
just confusing people.
it's like, socialism gets so demonized, so they move it to progressive, and then that gets incredibly demonized by Republicans. So then they, do like Build Back Better and things like that. That gets demonized, and it's like now we are, what's the Ezra Klein word where, like supply side or abundance,
Yeah.
like isn't that successful? Like now we have a new abundance agenda that all the Democrats are running on that is kind of like Build Back Better, but without the connotations of Joe Biden. And then when that inevitably gets demonized, like shouldn't just every presidential election every 4 years, like all the candidates have some like brand new giant agenda with a new term and like not the baggage of the previous ones, and the new people are bringing up the ideas, so it'll shift and morph a little bit anyway. But shouldn't we just constantly be reinventing ourselves and reinventing our ideas and policies, initiatives, proposals for the law and things like that?
That's a good point. The abundance one is actually a really good example of that, because I don't think, at least as far as I've heard, that abundance has been like appropriately like tarred and feathered the way they do.
Yeah.
Like that's a good example. Yeah, I don't think like, and I guess it's like it's a good way of explaining something in a way that people who are more likely to hate it don't intuitively just hate, right? Like the idea of DEI, diversity, having the word diversity in the title is probably bad. Inclusion, some people really hate that for some reason.
It
But yeah,
really sets them off.
yeah, something like abundant. Like I think that's a good example. So maybe you are into something. Well, do you have any recommendations for things you would change, or
Not off the top of my head, but I mean, like abundance is a good one to run in for 2028. But like, shouldn't like I guess that's kind of a problem is you don't have that many politicians, despite it being their career, and like a lot of them have giant ambitions to like run for president or something, and it's like they don't really have any unique or
like a
uh,
slogan?
yeah, a slogan or even like a big policy. Like, and maybe part of the problem too is that like so many politicians or senators, and I was thinking about this today, like a lot of senators and governors, like someone I heard was criticizing Gavin Newsom because he doesn't have like a big policy proposal or agenda, but he's also a governor. So he's like working on like water issues, land issues, zoning issues, the city's like homeless problems. He's got to deal with like, infrastructure across the entire state. And it's just there's so much on their plate that it, I guess, maybe is hard to create just like a one, like a buzzword or a one size fits all for a governor's agenda when they're literally on a day to day basis covering so many different topics and issues. So I get that it's hard, but I mean, I would think that like the branding people in the Democratic Party or the DNC would, shouldn't there be someone's job just thinking about this all day long and gets paid like 150 grand by like some consultancy group that the Democrats like just like pay every single election to help them figure all this stuff out?
No, that's interesting. I think your example of abundance is interesting because it came from political pundits who talk about politics all day, whereas things like
Yeah.
DEI and woke came intrinsically from like the academy and university professors who most
Yeah.
people are predisposed not to like or listen to anyway. And a lot of them are actually just writing for themselves. Like there's this funny thing I
Yeah.
read that like the average PhD who's writing papers in journals has an average viewership of like 50 other academics who write the same kinds of articles in the same
Yeah.
kinds of journals. And so yeah, I don't know.
It's
That's a
like less
really
successful than I am with the halfway post, my
yeah.
Substack.
No,
Like
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
that's a good yeah. I mean, in some ways, you are more successful, and people like Ezra Klein, like how many people working on urban infrastructure and housing in cities all around America, right? Like big cities, New
Yeah.
York City, Philadelphia, and they write a book called Abundance that probably gets it's a New York Times bestseller and sold like a couple million copies, right? So yeah, infinitely more influential in some ways, but
Yeah. Um, I wanted to move on to maybe a little bit of history and what, like, you're a fan of history. What do you think that previous presidents would make of Donald Trump? And maybe we can stick it to like second term Trump, especially, or I mean, go wild with it in first term too if you want. But what do you think like Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson, Hamilton, FDR, or dealer's choice of more obscure presidents would like make of Trump?
uh, let's see. I don't know. I think Lincoln was very
Yeah.
whether his personal life, his business dealings, or in politics would probably rub them the wrong way. I think he's the kind of person who, like the Federalist Papers, so here we're talking specifically like someone like James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, not a president, obviously, but would be uniquely predisposed to probably shit on Twitter
Yeah.
if they were alive. Like, I mean, certainly, like the idea of like an autocrat, someone trying, like, people talk about like, oh, whether it's FDR or Lyndon Johnson, Nixon, Reagan, George W. Bush, right? All these people would have probably run afoul of the idea of like the president being able to just do all the shit that the modern president, certainly a 21st century president, does. You could say the same thing with executive orders from George W. Bush, Obama, Biden, Trump, obviously. So yeah, I think it would probably be uniformly negative. What about you?
Yeah. I don't know, like the lack of manliness and like responsibility and just like taking responsibility for things that he says and does. Like I think a lot of presidents that like thought the presidency ought to have like a man of high stature. And to be, like for a long time, like I think a lot of the founders just hoped or maybe even assumed that the American people would never, like a lot of the Federalist Papers were basically convincing a lot of the first states to sign on because they thought it would protect against the demagogue. There were enough checks and balances that like Congress would be inherently power hungry for itself, that they would never just be like a rubber stamp on like the executive branch's arguably illegal and overreaching like policies and executive orders and things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that like one of the things that they thought people would be so greedy in a particular way, greedy for power, right? The idea that the House of Representatives and the Senate would never want to give up an inch of their power to
Yeah.
the president. The same thing with the Supreme Court, for that matter. So it would be interesting to think about which one of their prior assumptions about how a republic going awry would end up kind of being. And I think that was probably one of the biggest ones. It was an assumption that the other branches of government would actually want to do their job, which is
Yeah.
falling apart quickly in this political culture. I'm trying to think what else though. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I had a interesting judicial idea. I'm not going to die on this hill. This will be my not going to die on this hill, but I'll bring up the idea anyway. But I had this idea that should theoretically there be a judicial branch check and balance on executive tyranny, where the court, perhaps in a unanimous decision, could remove a president. And so basically, like if the legislature it becomes a rubber stamp and like bribed and threatened by the president to do whatever a lawless president like Trump wants to do, like should, and I'm not even saying this is possible, but theoretically could that be an interesting check and balance that like if you had all 9 Supreme Court justices agree that the president's being lawful, they could kick him out or something and replace him with the vice president. And like is the Supreme Court, is 9 justices too few people that could be kind of corrupted itself? Like you could just bribe 9 people. Like at least with Congress, you have to get like the votes of so many House members and so many senators. Like that's a big uphill battle to remove a president. Would it be too easy a check and balance and give too much authority over like the judiciary? And again, I'm not going to die on this hill. I'm not saying it's possible or that we necessarily should do it, but just throwing it out there. Like, should there be one more check and balance on the executive from the judicial branch?
I guess what's more likely, have it like majorities of the Senate and House vote to impeach a president or invoke the 25th Amendment or like have 9 Supreme Court justices unanimously agree.
Because the
I mean, one of the
justices are theoretically not so partisan. In theory, especially with our first past the post system, it's unlikely that it'll ever be like 9-0 with like a liberal or conservative, majority,
Mhm. Yeah,
theoretically.
yeah, I don't know. Part of me, I always like think about things like this, and then I just come back to the thought of like, well, if no one else in government's going to do their fucking job, like, what's the point of having one more failsafe, one more check and balance, right? If all the
Yeah, I
other
guess that's
checks and
true.
balances have failed, like, fuck it.
Right. What do you think of the Supreme Court in general? There's some recent rulings. I think they ruled that like the Illinois National Guard had no right to be deployed. The National Guard in Illinois. I forget which of the two. I didn't write down the distinction. But what do you make of the Supreme Court? What do you make of Chief Justice John Roberts? I think he's celebrating his like 20th anniversary now as the Chief Justice. And like, what do you make of the rulings that they are kind of they're giving Trump power in accordance with the kind of unitary executive philosophy and a kind of like like old school conservative style. However, they are limiting some of his more batshit crazy stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's good that like some of them still vote a different way. Well, other than Alito and Thomas, obviously, the other
Yeah,
7 still sometimes surprise like legal observers. So, like, as long as like you have people like Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, like occasionally surprising people, I think that's a good thing, which shows that they actually do have a conscience that they vote sometimes, whether or not
yeah.
on the important votes that'll happen. That we'll see what happens in the next 3 years, but. Yeah, I mean the Supreme Court, like, I mean, people put in the comments here, like, yeah, there should be term limits. I think like the idea that you'd have someone put on the court in their 50s and staying on until they're 90 years old is fucking stupid.
Or even
Like,
worse, put it in the court in their like mid 40s. I don't think
yeah,
Amy Coney Barrett's that old.
yeah, and then it's like, if you just think in a political science way, like what are the incentives, the way the Supreme Court is set up, and like, people joke about like late stage capitalism, but are we in late stage Supreme Court here, where we're just going to put a fucking 22-year-old who just graduated, from law
Yeah,
school and say, oh,
right.
he's a Republican and put him on the court? Like, we're probably not too far away from that. And like,
Also, the court
plus,
is so few; it does have the negative ambition or motivation to just kill a couple Supreme Court justices, right? Like that's maybe a fucked
yeah.
up
Well, that gets to the
easy likelihood.
incentives. It gets into the incentives, which are so fucked up, which is, just the fact that you're like on for life. Like that makes no sense. Like you have this job for life. I don't know. I had a thought, but I just kind of
Like
lost track of it.
into
But
being senile and stuff like that, and unless you retire, no one can remove
oh,
you. I guess.
yeah. What I was gonna say is like, if you imagine like what's the worst case scenario that would happen? Like imagine like one political party is like, let's say it's 3 to 5, 3 to 6 or whatever, like it is now, and like someone murdered two more Democrats, and then there's Trump gets to put on
Yeah.
two more.
What if
So
Trump has somebody murder two like justices and then pardons them, and then everyone gets off scot free because
yeah,
like our insane pardon power?
yeah, what I was gonna say is that like you can imagine a situation where like this 6-3 becomes like 7-2, right? And then okay, so there's seven Republicans and two Democrats. Like, what are the actual odds, likelihood that like there wouldn't be a Republican majority on the Supreme Court forever, right? If it got to
Yeah. Right.
7-2 and they all make sure they don't just accidentally have a heart attack and die before they, leave the bench, and, there's a Republican president, like we would effectively always have a Republican majority in the Supreme Court, I think. Like I think it was pretty good with 5-4, where, you have 70-year-olds making the rational decision to get off the Supreme Court in their, late 70s and not wait till they're like 94 or whatever. Yeah, I just think that our political system has some things, the Supreme Court specifically, that is rife for some terrible long term political science related consequences.
Yeah, and I would like to point out that it's Democrats that are staying on way too long. Obviously, Ruth Bader Ginsburg kind of fucked the court by trying to hold out for a female president to appoint her successor. But then you look at Congress, and I think like the last five Congress members to die were Democrats, and like of the last like 15, or I think like the majority of them were Democrats. So, Democrats, if you're listening and you're fucking old, maybe retire before you fuck our political process even more. Like if you check the scoreboard, there's a Republican trifecta. You know?
Well, and there's things that like there's so many easy solutions that people have already spent a lot of time looking at. Like when the Biden administration was looking at this, like there are ways that you can change the Supreme Court, which does not actually appreciably change the Democrats and Republicans on the court right now. And then, it just creates a situation where like hypothetically, if a political party lost like three elections in a row, like they would get to change the balance of the Supreme Court, which would be in line with democracy, right?
Yeah,
On the one hand.
when you look at like the last, what is it, like 9 elections, Democrats have won 7 times or something, and they won the popular vote like something to the effect of that. You know, where like if the process was fair, we would have a giant liberal majority on the Supreme Court right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but regardless, it's like, can we come up with a system that doesn't have like the worst possible outcomes? Because in some ways, like, we're as we become more polarized and this country becomes a little more crazy, and like, and Democrats and Republicans, like they're not symmetrical. Obviously, the Republicans have done way more than the Democrats. But if you have one political party that's like just trying to be a stick in the mud on everything, like there are ways you can fuck over this country. Like, I would say like just the distribution of power, which becomes more and more unfair over time. And the fact that like we can't ever do anything to change anything is just kind of ludicrous to me. Like at some point, like I bring this up all the time, and I think it's fascinating. Like the average, the difference in population between the smallest state and biggest state in the founding of the country in 1789 was like I believe it was Rhode Island and Virginia, and like Virginia had 13 times as many people as Rhode Island. But now it's like between Wyoming and California's got like more people than entire countries, and Wyoming has like 750,000 people. It's ludicrous. So like California's
Yeah,
40 million people. Like so then I mean, what is that? That's more than like 58-1 or something. So we went
yeah,
from like,
right.
yeah, and the important thing is like Madison wrote most of the Federalist Papers. He's the one who thought the idea of having like a House of Representatives and Senate with the Senate having two senators per state. He thought that compromise was fucking stupid, and it's become like more and more stupid over time. So it's even
Yeah.
worse than it was in like 1789 when he thought it was stupid, and he's the guy who wrote like the bulk of the Constitution.
Well, what do you think what do you think there could be something that Democrats could do? Would it be like splitting up big states into
So I
more
don't think the
states and having
Constitution
more
allows.
senators?
I don't think the Constitution allows like states to be broken up. One of the things is like give more power to the House of Representatives. They capped it at 450 arbitrarily. Like
The
as
number
a
of seats?
yeah.
You mean
I mean,
435?
what did I say? Yeah, 450.
450, but
Yeah, 435. Yeah, so they capped it, but I mean, if it went to 500 and 550, like it would be, would it be that much more unreasonable for Congress members to do their job? Like the idea that like the average House representative in some states has like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of more people they represent than members in
yeah,
other states, which is highly undemocratic in some ways.
right.
That's not like the biggest thing in the world, but the
If you
idea
were
that like
if you were a dictator, would you like get rid of the Senate? Like, would you like? Is it just dumb to have so many small states have equal representation that then can hold up Congress because the Senate has to vote for anything the House that has more Democratic votes on? Like
I
the
don't think
Senate
I
gets a veto on it and has to approve it.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it enough to like really have like a really concrete thought on that. But like certainly they're like the most minimal things you could do is just add like DC as a state for one, right?
In Puerto
Like
Rico.
yeah, in Puerto Rico if they vote on it or whatever. But like I mean, then you start
What
running
about
that
the
like
idea of bringing Puerto Rico in? It's like 8 states that are like equal to the population of like Wyoming or North Dakota or something.
yeah, well
in east
yeah.
to west, to southwest, and northeast Puerto Rico.
Well, I think from like a democratic perspective in political science, you never want to just be fucking over everything, anything you can. That's not like yeah,
Like the
screwed down.
Dakotas, that was like the Republicans in what, like the 1880s, being like, fuck the Democrats. We want more, we want more
More
senators or
free
whatever.
states or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it probably like having two Dakotas made a lot more sense back then than it does now. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of rural states, but you could probably make a credible argument that like actually combining them would probably create better like citizen services for the
Yeah.
people living in that
And
area.
yeah, waste less money when you have more like general programs for all of them or whatever, or like police
Yeah,
departments,
and it's not
government
like
systems.
size. Size isn't a limiting factor because Texas is fucking huge. Alaska's fucking
Yeah.
huge, right? But we have big states, and a lot of those big states have a hell of a lot more people than like a bunch of the small states combined. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I had this interesting idea or realization that we really haven't had that many military, like general presidents in quite a while. I think the last one that was like really even in the military was George H.W. Bush, right? I guess George W. Bush had that kind of National Guard service that he may or may not have attended or whatever. But do you think is it good that America has had like, like for an entire generation now, pretty rock solid civilian control of the military? Like we used to
well,
have general presidents all the time.
we've had people run, they just didn't win. Like McCain was in the military, Bob Dole was in the military. I think part of the problem is like a lot of the military presidents of the past were very popular and famous for like winning very big
Yeah.
wars, and I think that like that's not really the like in Iraq and Afghanistan, you never had one general or admiral just like run the war, right? They swapped out every 18
Yeah.
months or so, some even less. As they and a lot of them were like that was their role, and then they went to like the Pentagon and then something else. But yeah, so I think I don't think like the military commanders have like the clout that they used to, at least with the public, because like you don't have one general kind of like leading a popular war. And they're,
Yeah, some of them are just leading like popular, frontal assaults. Some of our presidents were just famous for like specific battles, even really,
yeah. And
like the
then,
War of
yeah,
1812 days and the War of what it was 1848, the Spanish, or the War with Mexico.
yeah. So I think the war in Iraq and Afghanistan doesn't have the same cultural or social or certainly political cachet that they once had. Like coming off like World War I, World War II, like it makes sense why like Eisenhower was elected when he did, right? And you don't have anyone of like Eisenhower's stature coming out of the Iraq and Afghanistan war.
Yeah,
You had Stanley McChrystal was pretty like common household name, but he kind of embarrassed himself and got fired. So probably a lot of his like name awareness is probably from having been fired more than actually being in the military. David
yeah.
Petraeus was a big name, but then he kind of embarrassed himself in scandal. Um, you know, did something that
Colin Powell
probably,
never really ran, although I guess he could have. He was pretty popular
yeah,
until
that's a
he
good
kind of
point.
soiled his reputation for the WMDs with George W. Bush.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Do you think this is just a purely hypothetical. Let's say Trump like starts telling the National Guard to shoot citizens in the street. Like let's say the midterms go badly and he does his plan to just surge National Guard or military units all around the country, like he I guess wants to, and is maybe having some policies that are trying to devise some system to do that. Or let's say he has ICE do it. Like, do you think? What do you think the chances of Trump having some kind of like military control, taking military control over the country? Or would the military like reject those orders to shoot Americans and maybe intervene if like ICE starts just,
Well, I mean, I hope people
blanket?
wouldn't like. I hope people wouldn't shoot people in the street. One of the thing I was thinking about is just like how many. It's a good thing how many people vote early. So if like you have ICE go terrorize people like a weekend before, like people just won't vote early that day, or they'll mail it
Yeah,
somewhere
right.
else. If they do it on
Or
election day, like
yeah,
a lot
people
of
have already voted.
yeah, and then it gets into like what as people start like suing every single like city and district to do something, right? We saw that in 2020 and 2024. You have these cases where like, oh, some precinct like, open like 20 minutes late, and then they immediately get like some judge in some
Yeah,
district to be like, nope, you're staying open an extra half hour at the end of the night. So I think you'd have lots of cases like that with judges like immediately intervening while that was happening. You'd probably get people being ordered not to do certain things. I would hope to God that they didn't just start shooting people in the street like in Philadelphia, because they're like, everyone here is a Democrat. Let's just like do something about that. But yeah, I think it would be infinitely more complicated than the Trump administration thinks, and stopping people from voting would be really hard. Like what would happen when police start immediately like keeping people like ICE agents from keeping people from voting? You know what I mean?
yeah, that's a
Like
good point.
there's already law, like you would already be violating laws. Like you can't just have federal government people fucking bothering people at a polling station. Like if you show up to a polling station with a sign, you have to be a certain amount of feet away, right? You can't just put a sign next to the building. It has to be a certain amount of feet away, like I just said. And like, you can't bother people. You can't give people water. You can't give them food. You can't be trying to bribe them at the door of the polling
Yeah.
station. So I
It
don't
has
know.
been nice
I
to
just
see. It has been nice to see how many like National Guard, like higher ups, just have no interest in helping Trump do this, and they know they're being politicized. It's also nice seeing like the city police in New York City just not giving a fuck about ICE and not cooperating with them. And then I saw a video just recently with like the snowstorm, like ICE is standing around in like some park in New York
freezing.
City. Well, they're freezing one, but then like there must be like some 2 dozen people just throwing snowballs nonstop at the ICE agents until they walk away. That's kind of funny. I have been kind of impressed by the kind of civic action. People just spending all day protesting outside, like some of these concentration camps and ICE headquarters, booing them everywhere. You get people driving around, following them, yelling, like reminding people's constitutional rights as ICE is trying to interact with them and stuff like that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And police are kind of like not getting involved. They're like, fuck you. We don't care. Like ICE will be like, this is coming from the president. We're federal. And it's like, we don't care. You're in our city. That's kind of nice to see.
Mhm.
Um, do you think, what do you make of Hakeem Jeffries? Do you think he should continue being Speaker of the House, or he should become Speaker of the House if Democrats take the House? Do you think they should have a different leader that's more exciting and interesting, like Ro Khanna or AOC maybe? Or is it better to have somebody boring as Speaker of the House that is maybe more focused on just whipping votes and keeping track of who's voting for what, rather than having someone be a lightning rod and like like a politically charged bomb thrower? Like, what do you think Democrats' strategy should be if they take the House?
That's a good question. Obviously, like American politics has become more of a popularity contest, and you need
Mhm.
engaging people. Everything's on social media now. So if you're not engaging and you're not good on camera, you probably shouldn't be the leader of anything right now. Certainly for a political party out of power that wants to convince people to vote for them. I think having a boring person, like quote unquote boring, like is probably not the way to go. I think they need someone
But what do you
who
make of
would.
like Nancy Pelosi, who wasn't like a giant firebrand? She wasn't that big of a lightning rod of like making controversy for herself, but she was probably one of the most effective and badass speakers in U.S. history, right? So
Yeah,
was
but I
that a
think she
good
was
thing
like.
that she?
Well, I think she was popular among people. She had high name recognition. People liked her. Republicans respected her. So I think that's actually a positive thing. We're more polarized now, where I don't think like any Democrat will have like quote respect from like the vast majority of Republicans, whether they're in the power or not. Yeah, I just think they need someone who is at least somewhat charismatic and can actually like hard charge on things. Like we can't have another. situation where we have a bunch of people say, "Oh, it's not really our job. We don't want to be overly political about Trump." Trump and his people have made literally every facet of American life political. So we need someone to fight
Right.
fire with fire, I think.
But do you think
And then
Hakeem Jeffries is the guy then?
I don't know.
So they switch it?
Well, the problem is like, who would you switch it to, right? And like, I think maybe having someone who is younger and has a lot of energy might be a good idea, right? Like, if someone's already going to be a lightning rod and people is already hated by the other side, and it's not going to help anything, why not have like Rokan or AOC, right? I think it'd be a good idea. Someone young who would actually, fight for something that people. That's another thing is like, okay, so you can't just be like, we're going to be anti-Trump. We're just going to fight Trump, or we're going to oppose this, or we're going to take a stand on this. Like, you need someone doing everything all the time who is a lightning rod for criticism for other members of Congress to go along with everything and help raise money. I mean, it's like there's a lot of parts of the job, and I think that like certainly a lot of the older people who are Democrats, I don't think they have like the stomach for it, or the endurance, I guess, or I don't know. I just the last couple of years has been very disappointed because I feel like a lot of Democrats just don't work very fast to do what they know they should do, right? And obviously Merrick Garland's like the most extreme
Yeah,
version of
right.
that. But there are other Democrats who are like, I don't know, being going into the rule book and finding every rule you can do to do everything you want to do. That takes a
Yeah.
lot of effort. That takes like a full court press from a lot of people. And, I think that like Democrats thinking like, oh, well, we need time to go back and, go to our districts and fundraise. It's like, no, you should be doing oversight. You should be, threatening to withhold money or something for things that are clearly illegal or you don't like. In this polarized environment, you need people who are going to play the game.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
agree with
that
that.
would be my one criteria.
Yeah. Speaking of that, how would you rate Mike Johnson, Speaker? He's not
Mike
playing the game.
Johnson.
He's not effective. People don't like him. He's not doing any legislation.
But it's
He,
funny because it's so asymmetric because Republicans, like, there's a large number of them are probably happy if nothing happened. Like, there were probably people who genuinely believe that that was an incredibly productive time when government was shut down. Because it's almost like a caricature of Ron Swanson. It's like every day I can personally keep anything from happening. And the
yeah.
day the government dies a little bit,
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's funny. Um, what do you think of Trump dismantling the American hegemony to the point that infamous American enemies and ideological haters like ISIS and Al Qaeda have really lost the zeal of trying to bring death to America? Do you think Trump kind of pulling back from so much of the world? They're like
Is that
just kind
true
of
though?
watching us.
You
I
think
mean,
ISIS doesn't want to kill Americans if they can?
do you think they're
So we're
trying
all
very
keep
hard?
mist in the
Do you
wind?
think Al Qaeda right now has their A game for bringing death to Americans?
No, I mean, I don't know if that's Trump making us a less appealing target, or maybe like the 20 years of war on terror has
No,
made us
well,
particularly good
how
at.
about this when you combine with like the jump ball, or maybe less jump ball now, but like the previous like civil war in Syria, the kind of open ended and large swaths of territory in Iraq that had like open game. You get like everything that's being disrupted with the power balances between Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Iran. Like, do you think there's just more for them to focus on getting in their own backyard rather than, especially with Trump, like, we've largely pulled out of Iraq and Afghanistan. Trump's trying to take out or trying to have less of a military kind of forward
Footprint?
position in Africa. Yeah, footprint all around the world. Like, don't you think they just have bigger fish to fry, kind of infighting amongst the maybe like Middle East in general, rather than just hating on America because we do have less control and we are like purposefully exerting less control over a lot of
Well,
regions?
we have less control, but I think there's also some areas of development which are good and positive for the Middle East, which like, and I'm not going to say that this is like an all abash good, but like the fact that you're having some countries which were basically failed states with porous borders becoming a little more less or a little less porous. For example, like, say what you will about the Taliban, they're like they want control of Afghanistan. So ISIS is fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan and conducting terrorist attacks there. But I think like, I don't agree with the Taliban, but like for the globe, I think like,
Good quote. I don't agree with the
yeah,
Taliban.
no, I mean, it's like, I think it's a fact, like, Syria is a developing situation right now, but like the fact that like there's not a civil war going across the entire country, right, is probably better than the alternative we saw 3 years ago, certainly better than 10 years ago. The fact that like you have some form of a centralized government actually maintaining control of like borders is probably good. So that's another reason why to your point, ISIS is kind of their hands full of stuff because they're losing their access points to move within countries. They're probably losing tons of people they used to get fighters from, certainly. So I think that's good. Whether or not that's Trump eliminating America's hegemony, I think is maybe a debatable thing, though. Does that make sense though? Like the fact that like, if Somalia had like one government that was kind of shitty, wouldn't that be better than like a bunch of fighting rebel groups and different governments that are recognized or not recognized by the international community and people
Yeah,
can come
but
and
that's
go
kind
as
of
they
my
please?
point. Is just like it seems like terrorism is really not as big a deal or as forward on people's minds as it used to be. Maybe the risk is lower. Like I
Well,
fly a lot.
I
I
think
feel like
one of the things you can't argue is like I think most countries, Middle Eastern countries included, have gotten better at identifying terrorists and doing having keeping tabs on them. There's certainly
yeah.
much more like facial awareness technology now than there was in the 90s, certainly on 2001, right? So, and multiple other countries have gotten tons of money from the U.S. government during the war on terror to basically get the technology and systems to support the kind of security apparatuses that do keep terrorists basically contained. And if they try to travel abroad, even within the Middle East, they're going to get found. They're going to get captured. They're going to get, detained, arrested, that kind of thing. So I think there's probably been a lot of things that do make the world much safer. And so to your point, I don't think it's necessarily just Trump convincing them to take their eye off the prize, so to speak.
My point is not so much on Trump getting any kind of credit, but just as in, like you look at like 2006, like 20 years ago, like everything was about terrorism and safety and they hate us for our freedoms and that kind of thing. But that's a lot of that kind of theater of the war on terror has kind of maybe disappeared from society a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, maybe haven't a bunch of those countries gotten a bunch of juicy like Huawei stuff from China that helps you track and maintain awareness of
Yeah,
what your
maybe.
dissidents are doing?
Yeah. What do you think of the bombings in Nigeria? Trump claims that we're protecting Christians. He bombed them on Christmas. And part of me just can't help but notice that Nigeria has the biggest oil reserves in Africa. And like Venezuela, the same thing. It's like the biggest oil reserves in like North America or the Western Hemisphere. And so some of these bombing for peace kind of initiatives from Trump, I can't help but notice the adjacency to fossil fuel wealth.
Yeah, and it's fucked up. Like, it's hard not to have multiple like minds on the matter. Like, why? It's like the perennial question, like, how involved do we get? Like, and is just bombing people normally helpful? But then on the other hand, there are people who are rebel groups and terrorist groups and cells within other countries who maybe the government doesn't have the capability or capacity to really fight. So, does America help a little bit? I'll be honest, I didn't really read anything about the Nigeria thing because I was trying to enjoy time with family. But
Yeah.
on the face of it, like, that's like when you hear like podcasts of people from the CIA talking about it, it's like the shit they do all day, every day. And, they say if the average American fucking knew like how many bad people there were, like,
Yeah.
for example, like, having met and worked with like Navy SEALs and stuff, it's just like, oh yeah, we did this mission in this one country and like there were a bunch of people who kidnapped a bunch of girls. So we went and did something about that. And it's like, there are fucking people out there all over the
Yeah.
world. And it's like, that's horrible. So, if maybe American intervening helps a little bit or helps save some people, I hope that's a good that's a good outcome. The relationship to oil is a spurious one, maybe,
Yeah.
but I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Some people have speculated that he's even doing it to maybe help Putin now that Putin's supply of oil has been plummeting. I think they're selling it at like $33 a barrel or something when like the national average is more like mid 60s. And I don't know if it's directly related, but some people are speculating. There's also, like our relationship and coordination with Saudi Arabia is very much about the global oil supply and things like that. And then, like, what do you think steel manning our relationship with Saudi Arabia is? Is it just kind of maintaining access to oil, maintaining the price of it globally? Is it to keep Saudi Arabia from joining forces with China or
You
Russia
mean
and kind
Iran?
of or Iran? Well, not Iran. I don't think Saudi Arabia would ever join forces with Iran. But there's that weird. I think Saudi Arabia has at times threatened that maybe they'll maybe do more business and go more into the sphere with China. And then coordinating with Russia on oil prices is obviously good for both countries. I don't
I
know. What
don't
do you
know.
make of that?
I think that's like the one thing I think we should have relationships with like every country, obviously, maybe less so China and Russia as they do bad things to try to destroy the global world order and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It's like, working with dictatorships, unfortunately, like if we only worked with democracies, the amount of countries we've worked with would be way smaller. There are a
Yeah.
lot of countries that don't have the most democratic, fair, free, I don't know, progressive, for lack of a better term, governments. And like, you still have to work with them. They still have resources the global economy needs. They still have people who just that. I mean, that goes into like the do you engage or not, and then what leverage do you have, or what leverage do you give up? That's kind of like the whole thing with the chips to China is like if we make them a little dependent on our computer chips and keep them from producing them entirely on their own is there's pros and cons to that. So like countries like Saudi Arabia or other Middle Eastern countries, there's still reasons to work with them. They're still interested in fighting terrorism just like we are. Granted, they're trying to protect their own dynasty or their own government, and we're protecting our way of life and our government and that kind of our people and that kind of thing. So it's complicated. I don't really have strong opinions, I guess, other than like the neighborhood's bad. Sometimes you have to work with bad people in the neighborhood.
Yeah. That's
I mean, what are
a
your
good way to
thoughts?
put it.
Like would we like interact less with them? Would we try to do what Biden did, say they're pariahs and never work with them? Or
I don't know. It's complicated because like right now, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they're kind of like laundering their reputations quite a bit with just the endless amount of money they have. So like they're investing in all these companies, they're buying up like sports teams around the world, they're investing in universities in America. There's so much money going on as they're trying to diversify their massive wealth, like sovereign wealth funds and everything like that. But certainly, I do think that you get to the point where a country like Saudi Arabia, if we're like if we don't get rid of our dependence on oil, or at least our interest in maintaining the oil prices for around the world, and then like you get into the whole thing about like the dollar, like being pegged to the dollar and things like that. There's all kinds of economic things that revolve around that, but. I don't know. It's interesting that that's like the one relationship that Trump wants to, like Trump is like America first. Oh, but except we'll do all this stuff and go to Saudi Arabia all the time. And Jared Kush, like his son, will get $2 billion or whatever from the wealth fund to make money off of investing.
well, it's way easier to work with an autocrat, that's for sure. If you have a dictator,
Yeah,
you
that's
just have to
true.
influence one person, whereas opposed to a messy democracy like the hated European countries. Like,
Yeah,
oh
like
fuck, we
every
have to work
four
with all
years you
these
gotta
people. Yeah.
try to manipulate and stuff. Yeah,
Well, and there's like shared, not, I shouldn't say universal, but shared like liberal values, right? It's easier for people to work with people who don't care about human rights, don't care about equality,
yeah,
don't care about how like immigrant people or political opposition is treated at all. Like it's obviously easier to do business with them. Certainly from a business perspective too, which is funny because it's always on Trump's mind, the business perspective. It is easy to build a mine, or in Trump's case, build towers in a country that can just waive any regulation or
yeah,
permit and just give
yeah,
you whatever you want,
yeah. And forgive him for like committing fraud against everyone that buys a property
Yeah,
and invests
yeah.
and gives him loans. Anything else to add to that before move to Epstein? I got some Epstein headlines here.
Oh, okay, let's go to that.
Okay. Do you think what do you make of like the cover up that they can't help but like have documents coming out, pictures of Trump accidentally that then they remove? Like I really thought that they would have more of a scalpel to removing Trump, but is it just that there's too many files for them to possibly do that? Is Trump just too involved and too much of a kind of participant in the sex trafficking that he's being caught inadvertently in all kinds of like intelligence and like data capture from Epstein and like his co-conspirators that like might be 10 or 11 other rich people.
Well, I mean,
Because
it's funny because in a way, it's like imagine like 15 years ago, like someone ran for president who had like had years of like calling members of Al Qaeda and visiting members of Al Qaeda and going on Al Qaeda's plane, and then like your friend who was in Al Qaeda went to jail, and like during the court proceedings they mentioned you a bunch, and then you become
yeah.
president, and you're like, I swear to God, I had nothing to do with Al Qaeda, and then drip, 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 and it's like, so I mean, we're seeing the inevitable result of an absurd situation in which someone who is heavily involved with someone who did some pretty bad stuff, and it's like, how does it not going to drip out? There's like hundreds and hundreds, well, apparently millions of documents about
Yeah,
this guy
right.
and the people you knew, and people, and it's so funny too because like people tend to forget that like people said that Trump was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend for 10 years. My best friend for 10 years was Al Qaeda, but I didn't have anything to do with Al
Yeah,
Qaeda.
right. Real quick, I wanted to add in that how ridiculous it is that Cash Patel and Pam Bondi like perjured themselves, talking about how like there's no evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to other people. And I just want to point out that Jeffrey Epstein's plane that a lot of people went on and knew the name of was called the Lolita Express. Like it's like if you wrote that in a fictional story, like the editors would be like, "That is too stupid and
Yeah.
too on the nose and too moronic. You got to change that." Like, have you read Lolita? Have you read the book?
No.
Oh, okay. I have read the book, and yeah, it's just to name your plane Lolita Express really fucked up. But then Pam Bondi made news today. Apparently, during like I don't know some interview or something, some press conference, something going on in her like office, she was on a phone call with Donald Trump, and apparently reporters like Trump yelled at her on the phone loud enough for reporters to hear. But Trump apparently was telling her to like ditch her plans to do the discharge petition or to stop making such a big deal about the Epstein files because he said, "quote My friends will get hurt." And like, do you think he has friends that he's worried about getting hurt, or do you think he's worried about him being hurt? Like, do you think Donald
I
Trump has that sympathy to worry about, like, all these poor people that he knew, like, getting caught up in the Epstein files, or does he know they're all guilty and he was guilty with them, and any one of them can squeal on him?
he's yeah. I think it's I mean, so my friends will get hurt. You're gonna defend a pedophile because your friends may be hurt. That's like
Yeah, right.
yeah. That's no
Um,
further comment needed. I
no
think
further comment. Yeah. I guess we can go to some more simpler stories, but I had some headlines I recorded that I just want to talk about. Um, I saw today that the state of Ohio has 48 trains a week. Isn't that sad? I looked it up.
that's
Ohio
what.
has 48 trains like that service like all of Ohio a week. Okay, that means
Is
like
that
trains
more or
going
less than
through it,
other
I
states?
think. And it's, well, I'm comparing it to other countries.
Oh,
So Ohio has a population of 12 million people. So 48 trains a week for 12 million people. Um, I looked up the population of Switzerland, which has 9 million people. So, what is that? Like 30% less population or something like that. But they have over 8,000 trains going through Switzerland daily. Isn't that wild? Like, I think talking about a little bit of an abundance agenda, I am very close to in the Democratic primary almost being like a single issue voter of just high
for
speed
trains.
rail. Yeah, for trains. Like, I want like I travel so much, I would love to take trains more instead of like bullshit airplanes with their like shitty small seats, bad
The problem is you're the
service.
only one though.
No, I don't think I'm the only one. I think a lot of people would take trains. Um, like, for instance, Amtrak, those 48 trains that go through Ohio, they serve the key cities of Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Toledo with no service to Columbus, Akron, or Dayton, which is just wild. Like, it's almost like malpractice to have a train go to Cleveland but not service Akron, to not go to Columbus, which is a giant city in its own right, and also the capital. Like, just in terms of like looking at it on a map, like you look at how much high speed rail China has built in the last 20 years, it just puts us to shame and is humiliating. And I think it's just really a failure of the public good and interest, a failure of imagination and idealism. Because, like, imagine how much more commerce and economics and like social mobility, people mobility, like tourism money that you could get if you could just like, take a train from St. Louis, easily get to Wichita, easily get to Tulsa, easily get to New York City, right? And like if everybody, like it's a good thing for the economy in America with just more and more mobility. And increasingly, as the internet is so fast, I think the physical mobility of people in the economy ought to be getting as fast as possible.
No, I mean I agree with you. You know, I think one of the things is like if they could just get rid of the regulatory like I don't know, all the sticks in the mud on the way if you want to build a train. Like the fact that like a mile of track is like $10 million or something like that, especially compared to other countries where they get it way cheaper. It's one of those things that like, I would be surprised if they cut all the regulations if like the market forces weren't there. Like if it didn't cost, 10 million a mile of track or whatever, people would probably build trains. And I think the problem would probably solve itself. That's one thing I like about the agenda is like to what degree, and this is something we've talked about a bunch, but like, if you've already built something somewhere, like especially in a city or like between cities and there's like highways and stuff, if you're, or an existing railroad that you could just use, like, I think the idea that like you need to worry so much about the environmental catastrophe of building something in the middle of a city, which is already an environmental catastrophe in a lot of ways. Like, I think like the average company, I think there's probably enough laws for construction companies not to just pollute and destroy the environment while they're building something like a house or something. Like, I
Yeah.
think the overarching environmental impact of just replacing infrastructure with new infrastructure, like the idea that you have to do 3, 4, 5 year NEPA studies to replace a road that was already there, as if like that road replacing it is going to do even somehow more damage than the damage it was already doing to the ecosystem. And that road may have been there since the 50s. So like the idea you're worried about the environmental impact of, repairing a 70-year-old road is kind of silly to me. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. I agree. Like, I would take trains, I guess, if like they existed. I think the
I would
market
take trains
forces.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love traveling, and other countries have great trains. And I go from city to city on trains for like $20 instead of having to take like a $80 minimum flight. And that's with like no carry on luggage and nickel and diming for everything, if it's not like $150 to take the flight and get that stuff.
yeah. One thing I think that people don't appreciate, and certainly not politicians, is the extent to which I think some people obviously hate change, but I think some people, when they look at dilapidation, whether it's like housing, whether it's like apartments, whether it's like community centers or like inner cities, or even like transportation, like I think a lot of people's like kind of doom and gloom sometimes is just manifested. That's like the whole idea of like the broken glass or broken window theory and spray paint,
Yeah.
like cleaning spray paint up the second you see it. But yeah, like I mean, if one thing like and here's another thing, like coming from a public policy background, like the extent to which people are so goddamn worried about like wasting a penny, and it's like fuck, like people waste money all the time. Like if like if you have to like waste some taxpayer money but you end up with fucking trains all over the country, I think it would be a good thing, right? Like the idea
Yeah.
that like I think we spend so much time focusing on how not to have any waste and how do we maximize efficiency, and then meanwhile you get people elected who are just going to give money to their cronies. And it's like, how is that?
Well, yeah. And
Isn't
you
that
you
worse?
spend all
Yeah.
that time doing that and planning it, and then after 15 years, you have no train that's serviceable anywhere, right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
bigger waste,
Yeah. And if you're a member of Congress and like you have 478 constituents on some goddamn island off the coast of Alaska, like fucking build a bridge. Like, who cares? It means that, does it matter to you in like Tulsa, like Tulsa, Arkansas, or whatever Tulsa is? Like,
Oklahoma.
yeah, fucking whatever state that is. Like, if you're just sitting in Colorado and like, technically a fourth of 1 penny of your tax income or tax money for the year was wasted on a bridge to Alaska, like, do you care? Like, does it have a meaningful impact on your life? And I would argue no. But yeah, that's my stance. And with the abundance, we should
Yeah. Well,
spend more, waste more, and just end up with
yeah.
stuff.
Well, I've said in the past that we need to bring back like pork barrel spending and earmarks where like you just get Congress people to vote for shit by just bribing them with like bridges or community centers or new roads or something in their state. You grease the wheels a little bit for the vote,
Yeah.
and at least
You
shit
know,
got done.
what's a great point about that is when there was like rampant pork barrel spending, we didn't have a fucking $40 trillion debt. So somehow they ended up
Yeah,
spending less
right.
money than we do now.
Yeah, that's true. What did you make of the recent headline that Trump is basically selling pardons for between $1 million and $6 million? And it's like he's got a whole system where you can basically grease the wheels for him, and he's doing all these bullshit pardons, including people that have committed rampant fraud, and then they just give him money and he pardons them. Do you think anything will be done about it, or is that's like such a low expected moral crime and like personality flaw that like we're not even surprised Trump would do it?
Yeah. I mean, like, there's nothing to say about it other than it's highly unethical, it's immoral, it's wrong, it's horrible, it's a terrible precedent. Like,
And Republicans aren't doing anything about it.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, imagine, like, imagine a Democratic president just pardoning like Greta Thunberg while she's burning federal property down, and it's like, oh, pardon, and then oh, she went out and did it. Like, Republicans would like be screaming bloody murder, and then it's like, and that's not
Yeah.
even a bribe I'm describing. You know what I mean? Like the fact that he
Yeah.
would just commit felonies like federal crimes, and then you don't want like bribing the president to give you a pardon as like
Yeah.
just like doing the cost of doing business in your
Yeah,
company.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Greta Thunberg, that's a good segue into my next thing about Peter Thiel, because Peter Thiel has waxed poetic about the his very real belief that Greta Thunberg might literally be the Antichrist. Just insane.
Which is funny because like I literally hear nothing about Greta Thunberg except like what the collective freak out of millions of Republicans who like
yeah.
oh, apparently she's doing this now. It's like ludicrous.
Yeah.
They give her the power that they so fear she
Oh,
has, which
yeah.
is funny.
Peter Thiel's really weird, and he's very obsessed with the Antichrist. And I just think that's weird because if anyone is the Antichrist, like he literally looks like Satan. Like whatever facial work he's getting done is really weird. His face is super shiny. He like there's no soul in his eyes. And then he made the news because he's threatening to leave California after Gavin Newsom announced a 1% wealth tax on really rich people. So it's just like, what the fuck do we do with that like insane level of greed and avarice and like miserly hoarding that a 1% tax increase after all these years of Trump giving these rich people tax cuts like constantly, right? Rich people have been getting nothing but tax cuts since the 70s when the tax rate really started coming down with like Nixon, and then Reagan just slashed all the taxes, George W. Bush tax cut, Bill Clinton tax cut, so on. They're getting so much money, but literally a 1% sales tax is now making a lot of billionaires want to leave California, fuck over all of their fellow Californians, screw over the society, economy, and like environment that like made them
Yeah.
rich as they are. And just what do you think? What does that say about America that like we can't like the rich here will not stomach a 1% tax increase?
Well, that's the same thing with like global corporate tax, right? So like the idea that all these companies from all around the world are like setting up shop in Ireland and like this is our corporate headquarters now, just so they can like
Yeah.
save 4% on taxes. So I think like probably long term, like I get the idea that like states should be competing, but like probably not to the extent where like you can get rich in one state. Like California, like everyone hates on California, but like California is like the state where like most people make all their money. Like if you're a billionaire, you probably made it in California. And then
Yeah.
you're like, fuck this, I'm out. Like once someone wants to make you pay 1%.
Yeah.
And it's
Give
like
a
the same
little
thing.
bit back.
Yeah, the economy does. Yeah, the American economy that's built on the backs of every goddamn American in this country grows 17%. And then, one state's like, hey, can we have 1% back? Like, fuck you. It's like you make all that money doing nothing. And it's like I've said this before, but like the logic of incorporation, like that's the American people allowing you to have a business and get out of the liability you would otherwise have for whatever you're doing. So like just the idea that you don't owe anything back to the people who authorized you to have a corporation and the laws and regulations.
And
It's
paid for the
yeah,
roads and shipping
yeah.
lanes and the seas and highways and the postal system and everything that allows you to do business in the first place.
Yeah, and then it's just like I mean, you could imagine like a state that just says we're going to become like a billionaires utopia where we take money from the poor and give it to you. Create like such a dystopian state where just like
Yeah.
all the billionaires go and like even
Well,
though they
some of
made
those tech guys they're trying to build company towns. Like Elon Musk was doing
yeah.
that, right? Like you're gonna have Elon bucks, and we're gonna go back to the days where you're just like completely dependent on your employers, uh, like how nice he seems today to like get your like canned foods with his face on it and
Yeah, it's
everything
like
like that.
Gilded Age, like Scrooge,
Yeah,
right? I want every goddamn penny I can squeeze out of everybody. So you
yeah,
better go to my company store where I'm going to pay you in company script, Tesla script, and then you can go to Tesla stores and buy
yeah,
Tesla, you know, I don't know, cans of sardines or whatever, like they're going
yeah.
to force feed you. But yeah,
And last but not least on my notes, I regret to inform you and everybody else listening that the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize winner has bombed Syria, Nigeria, and Venezuela. What does it say about the annual, I guess, FIFA Peace Prize that the first inaugural winner has not been so peaceful the last couple weeks?
I just hope they take it into account next year when they give it to the
yeah,
second
yeah.
winner.
Do you think FIFA will give it to him 2 years in a row? Why not 4 years in a row?
Yeah. Why wouldn't they? I mean, who else would they give it to? They're not gonna like. I mean, who else
Yeah.
would they? Who
Next
else
year,
would?
Malala. Donald Trump. Yeah, I don't know. You got anything you want to say? We've been talking for
No,
about an hour
we've been
40.
pushing through for like an hour and a half. That's
Yeah.
I'm good.
All right. Everybody, check out the Halfway Cafe, the Halfway Post on Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky. Check out Adrian Polk Thoughts. Is it? That's your Substack that you're
Yeah.
writing. You got some good stuff you're writing a lot more frequently now. Thanks for listening to Brain Milk, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week, and
Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Hope everyone has a good celebration. And I guess, real quick, what do you think of 2026? Bullish, bearish, happy, excited, enthusiastic? Are you think it's going to be another doomscape of shitty news and authoritarian overreach?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see. This like 2020. This could be the
Yeah.
last year of American democracy. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, before the midterms go bad and Trump starts killing Americans in the streets
Yeah.
with ICE or
I just
something.
want to
Yeah.
know if I'm going to live like a Mad Max Fury kind of life the rest of my life, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Catch Brain Milk next time. And then check us out. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Our videos go there. So look for us there. Subscribe so you always see us and help us grow. Thanks for listening, everybody. Talk to you later. See you, Adrian.
See ya.